Season 2 of The Loud House. One of the show's most important seasons, and one that the show will continue to build upon for the rest of the Savino era, and in some cases, the rest of the series. Given the initial hype behind the show, the second season was greenlit as soon as the first one premiered, and there's a lot about this season that fell in response to what the first season did. But the best way to sum it up would be this: a season of repairing what didn't work, refining what did, and expanding upon the world and focus of the show. Though, because this is Season 2, there is an elephant in the room we need to address, and I want to get this done and dusted before we continue with the meat and potatoes of the retrospective. A lot of you probably saw this coming, but there are 2 episodes that are way too important not to mention. But I don't want to bog down the rest of the video with negativity, nor do they exemplify any of the trends in Season 2, so we're going to keep it brief. For those who don't know, this is the season that contains the show's most infamous and controversial episodes, No Such Luck and Brawl in the Family. They're hated for their treatment of Lincoln, and were one of the first real points of contention among the fanbase. But many have already discussed these episodes over the past 7 years, so there isn't much else to be said. So if you'd like to learn more about them, and what makes them so contentious, I'll refer you to another source. And in a move that might not be too popular, I'm actually going to recommend TheMysteriousMrEnter's videos on these 2 episodes. They're only a couple of years old, and sure they have a bit of that quote-unquote rage to them, but they do a very good job of explaining the critical flaws of the episodes and why they're so hated. I'll leave the links to these videos in the description, and with that, let's get back to the retrospective. Season 2 made some changes to the show's formula in order to fix the more contentious elements in Season 1. Not an overhaul or anything like that, but definitely some evolution in the basic premise. Gone are much of the mean-spirited elements and sister-based antagonism. The siblings used to butt heads on a regular basis, but now they're almost always working together, with Lincoln settling into the role as their leader and the go-to idea guy. Instead of episodes about Lincoln himself trying to get something he wants or survive a family ordeal, it'll be the siblings collectively, often working towards a goal and having to fix the mistakes they make. Sometimes, it'll be the siblings having an issue with what one of them is doing, or vice versa. Notably, the season avoids putting Lincoln in the one-against-the-rest role of sorts, likely due to the negative reception it received last season. And the more typical Lincoln wants something or has to deal with an ordeal endeavors are saved for out-of-the-house Lincoln and Clyde adventures instead. With these changes, it also results in Lincoln talking to the viewer much less often. It still occurs from time to time, but it's not a show staple anymore. They instead opt to get straight to the action and use other methods of getting that premise going. There are a couple of exceptions to this plot structure, though, and they serve as this season's lingering examples of broken Aesops. Alongside Brawl in the Family, the most critical example that comes to mind is Making the Grade, an episode where Lisa, who's in kindergarten, requests to join a higher grade and ends up in Lincoln's class. She displays her intellect right off the bat, resulting in Mrs. Johnson developing unrealistic expectations of her students and giving them loads of extra work. Lincoln's own friends ostracize him in response to Lisa's behavior, and it results in him asking Lisa to tone it down a bit while they're in class. She instead way overcompensates, and while she and Link are considered cool again, she's no longer interested in helping the siblings with intellectual matters like homework and repair, citing Lincoln as having shown her the way. Whether she genuinely believed this or was just trying to teach Lincoln a lesson isn't certain, but the siblings express their anger towards Lincoln for this change. Even Lisa's kindergarten teacher gets in on it, guilting Lincoln for his decision when Lisa was developing a cure for her now sick class. Link is expected to make the sacrifice of sitting at the sticky table for the rest of his elementary school days if it means letting Lisa be herself again, and she agrees to become just that. Granted, all's well that ends well, as Lincoln's friends learn to accept him again like nothing had happened, and Lisa goes back to kindergarten. But it's clear that this episode wanted Lincoln to be the lesson learner again. Even though, to be completely honest, he didn't do anything wrong here at all. He was being completely reasonable. Looking back on this, a lot of it feels familiar. Lincoln being the designated lesson learner, a broken Aesop, and yet another let people be themselves plot, questionable execution of the Aesop, Mrs. Johnson being unreasonable, Lynn and Rita's faces being obscure, flaky friends, and much more. It feels very much like a Season 1 episode, and a culmination of that season's issues. It is for this reason that it's theorized that this episode, along with Brawl in the Family, are Season 1 holdovers. Granted, there's no concrete evidence for this, and the episode's production codes plant them firmly in Season 2, but it's possible that these were scripts that didn't make the cut last season and were repurposed here. Either way, these two, or three if you count No Such Luck, are the big exceptions and not the rule at all. Going back to this season's trends, we got more sister-focused episodes this time around as well, humanizing and expanding upon them. They typically executed this in two different ways. Some follow the path of house music or Affair to Remember, being told from the perspective of whichever sister they're about. We start to see more of these as the series progresses. Others, though, give a sister focus but tell it through Lincoln's perspective. Back in Black, for example, is a Lucy-focused episode, but told through the lens of Lincoln, and his science project with Rusty is the driving force of the plot. This yin and yang of sorts leads us to another interesting duo of episodes in regards to how Lincoln's role is handled, patching things up and friend or foe. The former is primarily a Lana and Lola plot, and it otherwise has no involvement from the rest of the family with the exception of Lincoln, who gets a small subplot with Clyde that many felt was kind of tacked on just to give him a presence in the episode. The latter, however, is the first time that Lincoln is completely absent from a plot. In fact, the family as a whole is pretty much missing outside of Lisa, and while we'd see more of the latter as the series progressed, don't get any wrong ideas. Lincoln was and still objectively is the main character. Don't let people tell you otherwise. But it shows that the writers have learned something important, that if Lincoln, or really any member of the Loud family, isn't needed for an episode's plot, they don't have to force in a role for them. It avoids the doing their bit mentality from last season's group episodes. Nonetheless, at this point, these kind of episodes are fewer and far between. The Loud family wouldn't be the only ones to benefit from the expansion in scope. Plenty of side characters scored expanded roles as well. Last season, our side characters were typically used either to start an episode's premise or for quick gags, and mainly stayed off to the side. But now, we see them play more major roles in the stories, serving as allies, antagonists, and even as the respective characters from time to time. Whether the role be big or small, the writers gave them much more screen time and plenty of opportunities to drive the plot forward. Now, is it just me, or does Season 2 have a sort of festive and out-and-about feeling to it? Not as much as, say, The Simpsons Season 8, but still a big presence. A lot of these Season 2 stories involve taking the characters to warm, upbeat settings, or centered around fun events. Contests, concerts, an end-of-the-year yearbook signing, and multiple episodes centered around throwing parties. We even get to see the celebration of two major holidays. More on that later. Once again, the show keeps its feet firmly grounded, and fantastical elements are kept on a tight leash. We do have one instance where magic supposedly has a major influence on the plot, but every instance of it is given a logical explanation. Granted, this picture of great-grandmother Harriet and the way she smiles at the end has some implications, but even that is left completely ambiguous. And that sums up the plot structure of a typical Season 2 episode. This season introduced a lot of additions and changes to the show's formula, and it doesn't stop there. With our expansion of the characters comes an expansion of the world as well. Season 2 takes way more episodes outside of the house and establishing what would become our reoccurring side locations. We have more episodes that take place at Royal Woods Elementary, and Flip's Food and Fuel has become the go-to place for groceries. We even get a new recurring locale introduced to us as well, that being Sunset Canyon, Pop Pop's new retirement home. With side characters like him taking on a larger role, it makes sense to bring him closer to the action. Minor locales get their fair share of spotlight as well. We see Duds for Dudes for the first time, the clothing store Rusty's dad owns, and one that would become a plot point a few episodes way down the line. We're also graced with Royal Wood's affinity for bizarre fusion cuisine. Jean Juan's French Mex made an appearance last season, but the writers decided to expand upon the concept by introducing more of these restaurants. It's a fun recurring element that adds to the quirkiness of Royal Woods, though I'd probably stay away from the anchovy Kung Pao. As is typical for the Savino era, the comic strip references continue. We see Lynn drop the first ever platter of linzania to promptly exclaim, "I hate Mondays." That ended up being hilariously prophetic. And alongside that, more Savino era means more parental bonuses. This Johnson implying that two of the frogs are screwing, Lynn and Rita skinny dipping, the whole package is there. Though outside of Lynn's victory dances, the booty shaking is basically gone. We also learn that all of the siblings canonically swear. Lola delivers a completely censored rant over the phone, and we even get an entire episode centered around the premise and how the Loud siblings think Lily's picked up on their swearing habits. It feels more akin to the regular show at that point. Thankfully though, she was just trying to say donuts. One of the most notable developments this season is that it would be the herald of the show's first two half-hour specials. Both are centered around major holidays, and even feature their own little modifications to the title sequence. And in Trick's case, the only time the end credits have ever received modifications. It's evidence that Nickelodeon considered the show a success, and it's clear that the staff poured a lot of love and ambition into these. So let's talk about them, shall we? 11 Louds a Leapin' was the season's opener, and gifted the series a Christmas episode during its very first year on the air. It's probably the season's biggest example of one of its trends, giving supporting characters major relevance in the plot. In this case, it's Mr. Grouse who gets a day in the limelight, told through Lincoln's perspective. It's Christmas Eve in the Loud House, and everyone is doing their holiday activities. Lincoln's out sledding, but loses his sled in Mr. Grouse's yard, lamenting that anything that enters never comes back. My yard, my property. Lincoln and Clyde sneak into Grouse's house and attempt to recover the sled, and in the process, Lincoln accidentally breaks it in shock. He eventually finds a photo of Mr. Grouse's family while cleaning up, learns that he had both an identical sled and a big family during his childhood. It's revealed that his grouchiness comes from his disconnection from his family, and after Lincoln speaks to the rest of the siblings, they decide to perform a carol sing for Mr. Grouse, along with the gift of a bus ticket to see his family. In return, he gives Lincoln his old sled, and when Lincoln goes to thank him, he tells him to thank Santa instead before heading off. Overall, a heartfelt tale of Christmas spirit, exemplifying the series' themes of familial love, while giving Mr. Grouse some character development in the process. Granted, he's still a grouch, but he's begun to bond with the Loud family from this point forward. Furthermore, Luna's song felt a bit by the books. Every Christmas special and their mother already pushes a Christmas isn't about the presents message. All these years later, I still feel that Linus Van Pelt did it best. Though I don't know if Luna can get away with singing scripture these days. It's also kind of funny that Mr. Grouse would say his gift is from Santa, since he'd go on to play the role of Santa in the whole picture just a few episodes later. The following year would bring forth Tricked, the first Halloween special and a macro-scale example of the usual Season 2 Lincoln and Clyde plot. All of the Louds are preparing for Halloween, except Lynn Sr., who's dreading it. Lincoln and Clyde are staking out the best trick-or-treating neighborhood, while the rest are helping Lucy with the annual Loud Haunted Corn Maze. They end up finding a rich neighborhood that gives out full-size candy bars, and on their way out, they bump into Hank and Hawk, two brutes who first appeared in the Loudest yard. They ask for information on the best neighborhood to get candy from, and nervously Lincoln tells them Franklin Avenue, his own street, in order to keep their find a secret. Night comes and Lincoln and Clyde trick-or-treat in the rich neighborhood while Hank and Hawk head to Franklin Avenue. Our protagonists then return to find their street completely trashed and desolate, pumpkins smashed and all, and everyone's candy stolen. Lucy laments that nobody showed up to the corn maze, and the two best friends realize their mistake. They're determined to save Halloween and go get everybody's candy back. Their attempt to steal it back fails, and the two brutes inform them of their preference for milk chocolate. Learning this, and remembering their disgust toward blood, Lincoln comes up with a plan and tells Lucy to ready the maze. They trick Hank and Hawk into the maze, and the two bullies are given the frightening of a lifetime, to the tune of You Got Tricked, the show's first piece of original music. Lucy finishes them off by dumping fake blood on them, and they're so horrified that they vow to never return to Royal Woods. Lucy is happy, the kids are out again, Lincoln and Clyde happily distribute their huge candy bars, and Halloween is saved. Every Loud was utilized well during this special, and it provides some of the series' most memorable moments. Not only do Hank and Hawk get some much-deserved comeuppance, but in a good piece of continuity they actually keep their word. Outside of an imagination sequence in the next season, the two of them never return to the show. It's also just nice to see Franklin Avenue decked out in Halloween decorations, given how both decorating and trick-or-treating as a whole have been on the decline. Keep up that spirit, Royal Woods! Change, refinement, and expansion of our stories means interesting changes for our characters as well. Alongside the evolution of his role being the sibling leader, his more negative traits have been greatly toned down as well. He's no longer portrayed as a put-upon loser, and his more selfish moments are heavily reduced. In turn, his kindness and altruism are amplified. He teaches Clyde how to be a good older brother in baby steps, helps Lana save the frogs in Frog Wild, and that teaches his siblings how to be persuasive. His best example, though, would be Read Aloud, where the Louds enter a reading contest to win an all-you-can-eat pizza buffet, and Lola is reluctant to read. Lincoln confronts her and she reveals that she has a reading disorder and can't properly read on her own. Lincoln sacrifices the contest victory in order to take the time to help Lola learn how to read her first book. She gets the hang of it and has his back when the family confronts him over the loss. And this is where the core of his character really shines through. Lincoln's interests are expanded upon as well. He's still a fan of Smooch, a Kiss parody that he even gets to meet thanks to his sisters repaying the favor for his altruism. Wilderness survivalism joins his repertoire of fun thanks to Rip Hardcore. And then there's Ace Savvy, which is briefly touched upon in Season 1 but gets a real spotlight in Pulp Friction. Lincoln and Clyde enter an Ace Savvy write-your-own-story comic contest in order to meet the comic's author, and even the sisters get in on the fun, playing the roles of the full deck, Lincoln's own original Ace Savvy characters. We even learn that Lincoln has a very interesting origin story. In Not Allowed, he doubts his lineage when his baby book is missing any photos or evidence of being brought home from the hospital. None of the sisters can remember the details properly, so he eventually goes to his parents for information. It turns out, actually, that Vanzilla broke down when Rita was in labor with him, and that Lincoln was delivered by the president and his wife inside a limousine. Lincoln was given a presidential blanket, and Secret Service disallowed Lynn and Rita to disclose the information, given where the president was originally headed. It was this encounter that inspired the two to give him the name Lincoln. One has to wonder what it would have been if this encounter had never occurred. Also, the president is never named, but if we subtract Lincoln's age from the time the show started, we land in 2005, so it would have likely been George W. Bush and his wife Laura. Interestingly, he was afraid of a magician's rabbit trick when he was younger, but has already began studying party tricks as well. Both fitting and ironic, given his role as a magician several seasons later. Clyde too gets plenty of interesting developments this season. He's shown to be surprisingly athletic, perhaps thanks to the training with his parents, and tackles the ramp of insanity with great skill. Though, he also has to deal with some difficult truths. Clyde, just like Lincoln, is a massive fan of ARG, a ghost hunting show that mimics the types of traveling ghost shows that media like Phasmophobia portrays. Hunter Spector, the show's host, has a legitimate passion for ghost hunting, but the schedule the show is put on means that he has to fake some of his encounters. Clyde sees this firsthand and begins to question his belief in the fantastical and supernatural, and it takes a triple team-up encounter to bring Clyde back. He's also forced to address his crush on Lori in Change of Heart, and endeavors to learn how to act normal around her after ruining another pair of her shoes with a nosebleed. Lenny gives him a hand, and while he made significant progress, the status quo is restored at the end. And this is thanks to Lori, oddly enough. Despite her clear disgust toward Clyde's behavior, even if he really can't help his chronic nosebleeds, she's grown to appreciate the attention he gives her, and he does genuinely care about her. Thus, her hubris kicks in when she mistakes Lenny's lessons for his crush going to her instead, and even resorts to dressing up like her to win his affections back. This, alongside her obsessive attachment to Bobby, gives an unhealthy feeling of HPD. Even outside this little incident, Lori had quite an active season on her hands. Building upon that point a moment ago, she loses her mind when she learns that Bobby is moving to Great Lakes City for good, but the two talk it out and come up with a long-distance plan. Before that, Bobby also attends a party she throws, and her failed attempts at sophistication and lack of guest enthusiasm bring forth a story akin to an overnight success. She even briefly moves into the garage, wanting to be away from her siblings but realizes how lonely it is and promptly backpedaling on the decision while attempting to save face. Lori has an unhealthy need for love and attention from others, but in the end, she just doesn't want to be alone. Outside of helping Clyde, Lenny took the back seat this season. She's shown to be skilled at decorating for and planning parties though, which is an awesome skill to have. Luna had a pretty low-key season herself. She did take the spotlight at the end of Ella's for Love, which introduced Sam Sharp alongside the rest of her bandmates. They do make a few cameos, though they wouldn't become major players again until next season. Outside of what's essentially a G-rated slasher film, Luann's up to her usual tricks. Making puns, annoying her siblings, the usual Luann fare. But this season takes it a step further and actually deconstructs her routine. When Luann amps things up for her comedy competition in No Laughing Matter, her siblings feel enough is enough, and Luann spirals into depression when she overhears them complaining about her. It convinces her to give up comedy, and when the siblings realize their mistake, they put their all into bringing that spark of passion back. Luann agrees to tone down her jokester behavior a bit, showing that she's become a little more mature. She'll even tack on a "but seriously" moment onto the end of some of her jokes now. She's gotten better at reading the room, even if she still has some work to do. Now Lynn. This isn't going to be fun. This season was her dethroning moment for a lot of fans. No Such Luck and Winner Takes All are considered among her worst outings in the series. This was the season that made her particularly infamous. It all stems from the writer's decision to really dial up her aggression and competitive nature, while her more playful side went from fun and sweet to intense and overbearing. She also starts to use coercion and aggression to get what she wants. It's possible that the writers needed a new sister to be the mean one after Lori became a kinder person, and that Lynn unfortunately got stuck with that role. Still, she's shown to be pretty normal in most appearances, and even had a few sweet moments, so her heart is still there. She also learns not to be such a bad winner and winner takes all, which is a positive. Oddly, she also mentions that Lori once hit her with a breadstick, and even winces when she thinks Lori's going to do it again. Brief reversion. Lucy is without a doubt one of the big winners this season. She gets multiple focus episodes and important roles. We're introduced to the Morticians Club for the first time, albeit briefly, along with Lucy's pet and little sidekick, Fangs the Vampire Bat. She also has not one, but two love interests this season. Silas ended up being one of the Ella's for Love one-off throwaways. It's Rocky where things really get interesting. He's introduced in Back in Black, being Rusty's younger brother who he brings to Lincoln's house while the two friends work on a science project together. Lucy falls in love with him, and the siblings dress her up to make her look normal, but he likes her just the way she is, and it seems like they're gonna go somewhere. And then he never comes back. A one-off character who's never mentioned again outside of a random podcast the same year. What makes this extremely odd, outside of Silas's existence, is that his older brother is about to become a major character, yet even he never mentions him again, even in a moment where he's listing off family members a few seasons later. One theory I've heard is that the two happen to resemble young versions of Johnny and Mavis Dracula from Hotel Transylvania, but take that with a grain of salt. Either way, it's evident that the writers want to restrict lasting romance to the older sisters instead. Back to the spooky and surreal, we have Spell It Out, where Lucy finds her great-grandmother Harriet's spellbook in the attic and wants to get back at her siblings for unintentionally ignoring her so much. This season loves its deconstructions, huh? She believes that the magic is working, and though all of it ends up being coincidental happenstance, the rest of the siblings apologize and Lucy ultimately feels better and goes to thank Grandma Harriet. Wow, Lucy gets two identical ancestors. And of course, let's not forget her role in Tricked, where she makes the annual Loud Family corn maze a massive success. What an unforgettable show, and an unforgettable season for Lucy. Lana's usage this season fits the refinement element. This season took what she already had and simply built it up and developed it. She was implied to have mechanical skills in Season 1, so here we get to see it in action. We're even introduced to Lana's idol, Bobby Fletcher, who holds a contest at the Burp & Burger to where the one to find the winning rapper gets to be a member of her pit crew. Lana braves a snowstorm to get it, and even if she had to give it up, she still gets to meet Bobby Fletcher and perform some work on her car, with a promised role in her pit crew when she turns 18. We also see her love of animals expanded upon, her little sidekick Hops being featured more prominently, and even getting a backstory, leading to her and Lincoln teaming up in a typical Rescue the Dissection Frogs story. Lana has passion, and the writers here are really starting to nurture it. Lola's season was very focused on her relationships with her family. She's inducted into the Bluebell Scouts with Lana, and the two compete for passage before making amends and joining the Scouts together. A simple story about friendship that shows that people with different talents can work well together. And alongside her learning experience in Read Aloud, she has another sweet moment with Lincoln when he decides to use his one free picture swap moment to replace Lola's bad yearbook photo with a good one, instead of the ones he and Clyde doctored up for themselves. Lola is always learning and continues her trend of mellowing out that last season had started. A much more sugary Lola. Like Lucy, Lisa had a very active season herself, one where we learn more about her and see some actual developments. The rather sociopathic tendencies she displayed in the first season are still there. She wanted to take her siblings' organs on multiple occasions, and even suggested chloroforming their father, but thankfully she never gets the opportunity to do either of these things. And this isn't limited to the bodies of others. It's revealed that her scientific experiments have caused a lot of bodily damage to herself. She's lost all of her baby teeth, has an extra toe, her scalp sometimes glows, and she burnt off her hair and has to wear a wig, all thanks to nuclear accidents. Though later episodes do at least show that her hair can grow back. The writers also threw in some more tidbits. We learn of Lisa's love of West Coast rap of all things, and her insane debt to the library. How do you manage to incur $50,000 in late fees? She also built a couple of new robots this season. Friendbot would always be kept in reserves, but Todd has a bright future ahead. Though here he's shown to be more typically robotic and downright threatening, a far cry from the goofy and amiable robot sidekick he'd become during the Rubiner years. Though the most important bit of development for Lisa this season comes in the form of friend or foe. Lisa has a failing social skills grade, one her teacher promises to change if she makes a friend, and by chance she picks a sweet girl named Darcy. Lisa initially just uses her for the sake of the grade change, put off by her rather silly behavior, and tried to break things off once she got what she wanted. This upsets Darcy, and Lisa is sent to time out to reflect on what she's done. Darcy eventually comforts her and offers to share a cookie, and Lisa realizes the true meaning of friendship, the two now becoming friends for real. A simple plot, but an important one that's opened up a sweeter side to Lisa and helped her start to really care for others. Now for Lily. Aside from her supposed bout with swearing, she still wasn't getting much spotlight. Though she does get a plot about an attachment to one of Laurie's childhood toys, and one that the Loud parents hid away for a good reason, Fenton the Feel-Better Fox. He's got good intentions, but the subtle horror elements the episode gives him certainly don't make me feel better. Nor does his resemblance to Foxy. And Lisa's got a security camera tablet in this episode as well. And we have an animatronic band this season. Oh no. The Loud parents definitely had some big changes this season. Outside of some holdover moments, the two get to show their faces to the world. And it makes sense that they did this. Every other adult in Royal Woods didn't follow the same kid perspective hidden face gimmick, so it made Lynn and Rita feel out of place in that regard. And once they'd been freed from this restriction, it gave them much more freedom to expand. The two share not one but two similar plots this season, where they run away with an idea they see from someone else and enforce it on their kids, and themselves, proceed to take it too far, and come to a realization that they screwed up. Both by different writers, too. Both parents undoubtedly benefited from this season's changes, but if anyone was one of the big winners this season, it was absolutely Lynn Sr. They really went guns blazing with this guy. He is all over this season. He's solidified as the goofy yet competent father, and the amount of focus he gets is staggering. We learn that he started a cowbell band with his best friend Kotaro, and the two join a van owners club together when Van Zella's temporarily sold. He also gets a short-lived addiction to smartphones, competes on Legends of the Hidden Temple, has a resort vacation, obsesses over home security, the whole package. Most importantly, though, the season took big steps in bringing Lynn closer to his dreams of being a restaurant chef. Fed Up reveals that he cooks all of the family's meals, and his skills at improvised cooking are on full display. Meanwhile, Job Insecurity has him quit his computer technician job and score a position as an assistant chef, working his way up in the world of cooking. They had a vision for him, and wasted no time getting his character rolling. We now know that Season 2 was just as big of a season for the secondary characters as it was for the main cast. We got introduced to some new faces while expanding on some of the big winners from last season. Let's see how they've grown. Mr. Grouse undoubtedly had a busy season, the writers having already taken a liking to him. Aside from his Christmas spotlight, he tended to play smaller but more plot-driving roles this time around instead of quick heckle cameos. Given how close to the action he is, it's natural that he'd be pulled into the escapades more often. When Laurie needs a face-saving excuse to move back into the house, Mr. Grouse agrees to wreck the garage, for a tray of lasagna, and ultimately fails, setting up the episode's confrontation. He takes a muffin bribe from Lynn Sr. to pretend to be a burglary victim, in order to get the kids to take home security more seriously. The Loud siblings even teach him all about computers in order to go to an interview in Lynn Sr.'s stead, becoming an expert technician in the process. He's still a bit of a jerk, but his role is being used well. Our other big mustachioed man had quite a busy season himself, and is already cementing himself as a writer's favorite. Flip this season continues to run with the scheming weasel characterization, but instead of some quick background jokes, he serves as the antagonist of two separate episodes. He takes on Lincoln and Clyde as interns, only to pit them against each other for the sake of free labor, and plans on scalping the winning Bobby Fletcher rapper, demanding it in exchange for digging the snowed-in Louds out of the Burpin' Burger. And both times, he's slammed by comeuppance. Now, a lot of people see Flip as a nuisance and a bit of a writer's pet, but the reason for this may lie in his voice actor. It may be a prestige thing. Flip, and Mr. Grouse as well, are voiced by John DiMaggio. In other words, the voice of Bender. And it's clear that they want him to have a Bender-like presence on the show. If this were an adult show, I guarantee you he'd be smoking cigars and pulling most Sizzlack-esque backroom operations. Lincoln's friend group is continuing to grow in prominence, and they're taking on more of a familiar form. Rusty's been solidified as part of the group now, and we start to regularly encounter them during school episodes. We even get an adventure told from their perspective, where they think Lincoln is having post-breakup blues and take him for a guy's day out. Interestingly, Rusty mentions having a mom in Back in Black, but it's revealed later that his dad is single. Possible marital troubles? No wonder this kid was kind of flaky last season. Alongside Sam and the Mortician's Club, some of the other sisters get a few of their friends introduced as well. We meet Margot, one of Lynn's friends, along with Benny Stein, Luann's future boyfriend and the only other Eligible for Love crush to make a reappearance, though we won't see him again until Season 3. With the increasing number of school episodes, we spend a lot of time exploring Royal Woods Elementary. Alongside Mrs. Johnson, who's grown to be more reasonable, we get introduced to more of the school's staff. Coach Bukowski appeared once or twice last season, but here we get to see him play a supporting role and out of the picture, hating his task of heading the yearbook operations. Interestingly, at the end of the episode, he delivers the line, "It's never too late to follow your passions," in response to his desire to be an Irish dancer. It's treated as a quick gag, but it's notable since we'd see Lynn Sr. use the line in a more serious context in the very next season. We're also introduced to the strict and no-nonsense Principal Huggins, and his quirky secretary Cheryl. Huggins gets two major roles right off the bat. He serves as an antagonist in Frog Wild, searching the students' houses for the stolen frogs, but ultimately comes to his senses by the end of the episode. Though we see a more sympathetic side to his character in Pulp Friction, as it's revealed that he was an avid Ace-Savvy fan himself as a kid, and that he only hindered Lincoln and Clyde because he believed that his comic couldn't compete with theirs in the contest. Lincoln and Clyde decide to incorporate him into their story as an antagonist-turned-hero, and bring him along to meet Ace-Savvy's creator when they win the contest. Hang in there, Huggins. Bringing things to one of our new settings, we're now seeing the Pop-Pop we all know and love. The Old and the Restless shows us how close to Lincoln he is, and that he even inherited his iconic white hair from him. The two are always in sync with each other and share a mutual love of junk food and big cannonballs. The man's a war veteran, and all of the exercise he gets makes him very athletic for his age. He's even shown being a squad of Marines at a game of paintball, and being Sunset Canyon's undisputed shuffleboard champion. He's the definition of a cool grandfather, and he's really started to find his footing. The rest of Sunset Canyon's residents would become minor recurring characters themselves, but the obvious breakout is Scoots, a wild old lady who plays by her own rules. While her attitude isn't the best, she's still shown to be helpful on several occasions. She hadn't yet become one of the go-to asshole characters that she'd become during the Rubner years. Heading back to the house, the pets had another strong year. While we already start to see more anthropomorphic traits from them, they're just as prominent as ever. They even got their own spotlight episode this season about the jealousy towards, and later the great rescue of, a lost dog that the Loud siblings temporarily adopted. Despite being a temporary Loud pet, this dog also continues in the trend of being named after famous cartoonists. In this case, being named Watterson, after Bill Watterson, the creator of Calvin and Hobbes. And to close off our supporting cast roundup, is the send-off of the Santiago siblings. Bobby gets a few appearances as a supporting character for Lori, while Ronnie Ann gets one more episode before their departure. Lincoln and Ronnie Ann have to do the egg-sitting project, and Lincoln is paranoid that Ronnie Ann is going to break the egg, leading to him making a rubber imitation of it. The two bicker about Lincoln's lack of trust, though given how Ronnie Ann's treated him, it's hard to blame him. And at the Santiago house, we get to see a more caring side to Ronnie Ann's character. And then they celebrate with waffles. Soon enough, though, came the Loudest mission relative chaos, where the family moves to Great Lake City and both kids have to adjust to life with a big family of their own. We get introduced to each member of the Casa Grande family, and being a backdoor pilot, several of the spin-off staples are set up. One of those family members is Sergio, their pet parrot, but is already way ahead of the anthropomorphism curve of the show's animals. Granted, if any animal is going to take on this role, a scarlet macaw, a bird that's known for its high intelligence and mimicry of human speech, makes the most sense. And at this point, he still spoke more like an actual parrot. After this point, Bobby would pop in sporadically, but Ronnie Ann is basically never mentioned outside of the occasional appearance. And that's a wrap for Season 2. It's been a very interesting season to revisit in its own way. It isn't as weird or as up and down as Season 1, but it forged an identity that would stick for the rest of the Savino tenure. The seeds are planted, the characters are solidified, and we've got a solid idea of what to expect going forward. They've worked out the kinks and are now looking toward the future. It passed the test that Season 2 of any show has put through, and even with the shakeups the show would get down the road, it's the success of this season that got us all the way to Season 9, especially with the standards Nick has these days. So what did you think of this season and the impact it had on the show? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in Season 3.